Welcome to the Fiber Girls Show, a podcast committed to connecting communities and accelerating businesses through fiber optics. Now, here's your host, Tanya Bohannon.
Welcome to the Fiber Girls Show podcast. I'm so excited that we're here on behalf of T.A.K. Fiber Optics. And in this show, we hope to connect communities and accelerate business by talking about all things fiber. My guest today is Lisa Youngers, President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Thanks so much for joining me, Lisa.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about you. Give us a little history about your background and how you got started in fiber optics.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to join you. I have a long background in telecommunications. I've been in telecom and communications more generally for about 25 plus years. I started my career in satellite and broadcast, and my satellite experience included C-band and KU-band, and we're hearing a lot about C-band again. I'm a lawyer and a lobbyist in the telecom space, so I was a counsel to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, advising them on energy and telecom matters. And then I moved to D.C., and I was a federal regulatory attorney for MCI, operating in front of the FCC and the Hill on competition issues, enforcement matters, etc. And then I similarly was a federal regulatory attorney for GCI, which is an Alaska-based CLEC, still doing federal regulatory issues at the FCC and on the Hill, including not only competition issues and enforcement matters, but also telehealth, USF, rural access, communications reaching education institutions, etc. So a little more about USF and rural healthcare and rural education in that role. And then I was with XO Communications for 13 years. And in that role, I was Vice President of Federal Affairs and Strategy. I was in front of the FCC and the Hill, still on issues of importance to telecommunications companies. Also, for a time, I oversaw PR, all external and internal messaging. And in addition to wireline issues, I had all wireless issues. And then I went on to lead NextLink Wireless, which was a spinoff of XO Communications. I was their CEO. And in that role, we were a spectrum manager and also a wireless provider to end-user customers. And the spectrum that we were working with at NextLink Wireless was upper millimeter wave spectrum. And then at some point that became sort of the spectrum that's the focus for 5G. So got to work on some great issues surrounding 5G. And then after NextLink Wireless, I took the helm at Fiber Broadband Association as president and CEO, and now representing about 250 different entities all in the Fiberverse on a variety of issues, running all aspects of the association. And I'm happy to talk more about the association, but I've been with the Fiber Broadband Association for over a year.
You're talking about communications. Have you always had a love for that, or what made you get into this type of industry?
I ended up in broadcast and satellite as my first job, and I just really never left communications. Eventually it was more telecommunications and, wireless, wireline and other issues, but kind of always stayed there after I started in satellite and broadcast. And I did do a stint at, I went to law school there, somewhere in between. But yes, I've, I guess, always been in communications.
Working in Washington, D.C., what is the hot topic there right now with regards to communication?
Well, great news for the Fiber Broadband Association and our members. From our perspective, it's about getting broadband out to communities. It's about building networks. And then there's always issues about funding and policies that support that. So those items are of major interest to my members. But there's always some other, communication issues that people are concerned with. But obviously we focus on the building of networks and what supports that. How do we get that deployed?
Mm-hmm. Well, you've written a few articles of importance related to fiber. You wrote an article called Fiber in Rural America, or Why We Need Faster Internet and How Does That Benefit Us? Let's talk about some of that information. Let's hit Fiber in Rural America first. Why is that so important?
Well, we know that more than 19 million Americans lack access to broadband, and a lot of those, vast majority of them live in rural America. And even where there is connectivity, it might not be the same as their urban counterparts experience or enjoy. And the reason we know access to really fiber broadband networks is so important, it creates the opportunities that communities need both to support education efforts, to avoid the homework gap, which some in Washington have coined, that is, allowing children to be able to complete their homework and support them in whatever their education needs are. We also know that the availability of broadband is directly related to lower unemployment, greater economic development. It allows for at-home and online businesses, but also just regular businesses to be able to support, the work they're doing. They need access to internet, reliable, high-speed access, and broadband provides that. And we know that broadband is directly related to economic development of communities of all sizes. So we do need to see that reliable, future-proof fiber broadband reaching further into all of our communities, and there shouldn't be a difference between what residents of more rural areas are able to experience versus urban. So we do talk about that, and we want to make sure that we are seeing broadband reach further into the community.
That takes a lot of funding. What are some of the ways that the smaller communities can access that money to be able to get fiber into their community?
Right. So there's actually a lot going on in this front. First of all, we previewed a cost study in June at our conference done by a firm called Cartesian, but done for the Fiber Broadband Association. And we actually do have a dollar figure with how you can build fiber networks all the way into rural communities and reach 90% of Americans. And we think that can be done. It's feasible. And building fiber broadband networks right away, out of the gate, do it right, do it once. It's more future-proof, more reliable. It supports other applications, Internet of Things, 5G, small cell, et cetera. You need fiber anyway to make all of those things work, and certainly wireless networks. So we support getting the fiber out to the rural areas right away. That's the right technology. If people choose other technologies, they're just going to come back and try to support a fiber build later. So let's get it done right, get it done right out of the gate. But how are communities supporting that? So we're seeing, first of all, there are federal and state programs that allow for funding of fiber broadband networks, whether it's FCC support or including a new program they have, RDOF, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, with comments due this fall about how that fund would work. $40 billion distributed over 10 years. We're just at the front end of looking at what that program would look like. And then things at the RUS, the Rural Utilities Service at the USDA, things they're already doing. They already have loan and grant programs, and they're very much in the middle of trying to evaluate projects and distribute that money. So those kind of programs exist. There's also state money. There are state broadband authorities and commissions in many of the different states, and communities can look at those programs. And then as well as public and private partnerships, and those can be arranged and structured in many different ways. We also see, sort of interestingly, we're talking about getting broadband further into the communities. And so we're seeing electric co-ops and municipalities step into this area and also build networks. They certainly have the desire to build those networks. They're close to their community end users. And especially in the case of the electric co-ops, they already have infrastructure in place to be the distributor of really this additional utility, broadband, because they're already doing it for electric. So they already have in-house systems and processes. They already have connections to end user consumers in the community itself. They already know the community, and they have many things in place to already be a distributor of electric. So it makes sense that they would get into the position of also providing broadband. We did see a good half dozen, if not more, states in the past year change laws to more specifically allow electric co-ops and in some cases municipalities actually get into the business of providing broadband. There had been some laws existing on the books in various states, probably many states, that prohibited electric co-ops or munis from getting into broadband, and we've seen that change. I think it's a recognition that those entities can help drive broadband further into closer to our customers, our consumers rather, in our country. And these are some of the entities that can help do that.
What are some of the things that are being done to help educate smaller communities about the importance of fiber?
Right, that's great, and I'm glad you asked that. So Fiber Broadband Association, because we are the expert association where sort of all the entities in the fiber universe come together, whether it's manufacturers or vendors or construction companies, engineering firms who have and are involved in the planning and building of networks. They all sort of come together here in our association. And so we have an annual conference with its focus being on education, and we provide a lot of information at really all stages of deployment, whether entities are just looking at building or later mid-deployment. And sort of a showcase of that is the Fiber Broadband Association was the first and sort of expertly has a fiber broadband starter kit. And we have a workshop built around that. We had one in June in Orlando, and we have one November 5th in Fort Collins, Colorado. And the whole purpose of the workshop is to help educate new entities on here are the tools you need, here's how you get into building your own broadband network. And that is definitely a corner piece of our association and our education. And we can provide those resources through our workshops or in other ways, and certainly through connections within our association. And we also have resources available to our members and prospective members to get them started. So definitely that is a component of our association, is that education and our fiber broadband workshop.
Yeah, that's great. Last month when we spoke with Mike Hill, who's the CEO of OnTrack and also a board member of the Fiber Broadband Association.
That's right. He
touched on the importance of it briefly, and we talked about how we were going to have you expand on that a little bit. So that's great.
Yes, and of course, glad that you just spoke with Mike. Mike has done so much for the fiber industry and has really been a long time important innovator and originator of our association and supporter of its work. So I'm so glad you got to speak with Mike already. He has quite the legacy in our industry and with our association.
If I haven't yet connected with becoming a member, how do I go about doing that? Is there a website?
Yeah, absolutely. Come to our website, www.fiberbroadband.org, and scroll down to membership and reach out to me or get a hold of our director of membership, Garrett Sheehan, right away. We have a lot of exciting things going on that people would probably love to be involved with, and we're constantly talking with members and trying to be responsive to things they're looking for and things they need. And we have a lot of ways for people to get involved.
Well, thank you for that. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the conference in Orlando, and I attended the Women in Fiber luncheon. And I know that you guys are just recently kicking that off as a group, Women in Fiber. So tell us a little bit about that. And I would love to hear your perspective on being a woman in the construction industry.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for being with us in Orlando. It turned out to be an overall great conference, really excited about attendance and the content we had to offer. And certainly one of the highlights was indeed the Women in Fiber lunch. I'm so glad you were able to join us. It was inspirational. It was a great time for women to gather and network and support one another. And we heard some great business tips, and we heard some inspiring stories. And I really appreciate you being there. It was really exciting. There was a certain amount of energy, and there was a real interest from the attendees at the lunch. They wanted to keep the conversation going. They wanted to keep that support and connection to other women going. And I think as you're referencing, even if it's communications or an engineering or construction-based business, and probably Women in Fiber more specifically, it is more male-dominated, and so it is nice to see and be connected with other women in that industry. And that is something that we're trying to do. So out of that lunch, as you stated, that gave birth to this Women in Fiber group. We're at the front end of that, and we're connecting as a group. And we have a LinkedIn group where people can join, members can join. And we have some articles of interest there, but we are going to try to add some programming. We have some topics we're thinking about. And I just think it's important for the women in this field to feel connected and to feel the support from fellow women in fiber. And frankly, in sort of staying with the theme of being responsive to our members, we were excited to kick it off. And we welcome the input from our members on what this looks like going forward. We have some ideas to get us started, but certainly some of this leadership, a lot of those ideas will come from the members themselves. But it was great to create something to carry on that energy we saw when we all met in June. So
yeah, there was a nice attendance there.
Yeah.
Through the years, you've been doing this for a while now. What do you feel have been some challenges for you as a female in the industry?
Well, I've been really, really fortunate. Of course, with any situation, you have great situations, and then you have other situations that are more challenging. I have to say I've always felt very supported by men and women colleagues, either those that are peers or those that I have reported up to, or even those that have reported to me. So I've always felt a really good sense of collegiality, whether it's from men or women, and really great support. So I think I've been really fortunate. I wouldn't say any challenge. I would say only interestingly, and as an observation, as I moved up the ranks and as things got more senior, you would see less women at the table. But I do think that is changing. That was never a challenge for me from sort of a being heard perspective. I felt like I was still heard, and perhaps I was just fortunate to be surrounded by respectful people, both men and women. But, certainly sometimes you don't always see the numbers there. But I do think that's changing. And I do have to say, hats off to this industry, and maybe it's telecom wide, very professional and welcoming, even when maybe you're only one of a handful of, or only one woman at the table. I feel like this industry has been very professional and respectful of that, and there's been no problem feeling welcome. But of course, we want to keep making it welcome and keep creating opportunities for other women. And I just know as a female at this point in my career, certainly, extending out a hand and pulling up the next woman as well. We all have to help each other. But as I said, I think this particular industry has been very professional in that regard. But to keep that going, to keep making other women feel welcome, to keep extending that hand, keep making sure there's more opportunities for more women to be at the table.
Right. Well, therein too, it's very helpful. Organizations like the Fiber Broadband Organization, having a group where women can connect, but also everybody connecting together. Right.
And also, we'd love to ask the right questions or get a conversation going around things that people are thinking about, just so there's a place to have, those discussions. We hope to create that environment. You mentioned, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead on one of your questions, but you mentioned the Women in Fiber group. We have other committees and groups, and we have been spending time and energy in that area trying to create committees and groups that our members want, things they want to hear about, things they want to talk about, committees they want to participate on, groups they want to participate on. And so that's been a focus area for us. So we have the policy committee, the marketing committee, the technology committee, our conference planning committee. And then we also have some new groups. We have Women in Fiber. That group, we have the deployment specialist group. That's where the construction and engineering firms are. And then we have the Canadian policy group, because of course we're an association for the Americas. And I should mention we also have a Latin America chapter, Fiber Broadband Association, LATAM. And we also have an affiliate, FOSA, the Fiber Optic Sensing Association. So we do try to be responsive, and there are other ways that people want to be involved, and we've tried to create those ways through committees, groups, chapters, affiliates. So hopefully members find those places where they want to spend their time and energy and connect with members who have those similar areas of focus.
Yeah. Great. Sounds like a great opportunity to connect.
We hope so.
So you have 2 conferences a year, you said?
Well, we have our annual conference and then usually some sort of regional. And this year our regional is at November 5th in Fort Collins, Colorado. And the focus of that is educational in this workshop. And we really want to emphasize bringing broadband to communities. And that's why we're in Fort Collins. They're doing great work there to build their own network. We know some of the folks involved in that project, and they have backgrounds and experience in community broadband. And so our regional being there is very intentional to highlight the importance of bringing broadband to communities.
Tell us again that website where we can get information.
Sure. Fiberbroadband.org is where you will find information about our association and membership, and there is indeed a regional page there to talk about the regional conference itself. And we'd love to have just tons of folks there, and we're excited about that.
Well, we have talked about a lot of great information, and I can't tell you thank you enough. Before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to be sure to say?
Sure. I am grateful to have this opportunity. I'm grateful to talk about bringing fiber into the communities, fiber broadband. It's certainly the most future-proof and reliable choice for bringing broadband to consumers. And, for a host of reasons, we've talked about how it's so important for education and bringing down unemployment and for businesses and entrepreneurial opportunities. But, also I touched briefly, but will emphasize here in closing, we also know that fiber is indeed the backbone for everything else we're talking about, from wireless networks and wireless applications to Internet of Things applications, including virtual reality, autonomous vehicle, e-gaming, because of the low latency of fiber, that the fiber characteristics really support all of those applications, everything we're thinking about in the future, and probably most notably small cell networks, 5G applications and 5G networks absolutely require tons and tons of fiber. And then, of course, smart city and smart community applications, things that cities and communities want to bring to their citizens, whether it's smart pedestrian traffic and smart stoplights to monitoring security and safety within a community or the homeless population, or just making informed citizens, that all of those smart city and smart community applications also demand fiber to support them, not to mention, of course, citywide or community-wide broadband networks themselves. So we've really found that fiber is the backbone to everything else. At our June conference in Orlando, our theme was Fiber, We Are the Difference. And we have indeed seen that fiber is the difference to everything that we're sort of trying to do in the communications space right now. It absolutely all demands a reliable fiber broadband network. And so we're proud to be standing sort of at the forefront of this and love bringing everybody in the fiber space together, and we'll continue to do so. And if people want to reach out to me, fiberbroadband.org, I'd love to answer more questions or continue having conversations around all of this, and certainly talk about membership and regionals and our education offerings.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate your time. And again, if you want to get connected with the Fiber Broadband Association, that's fiberbroadband.org. And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show today. To stay up to date with upcoming podcasts, you can find us at thefibergirlshow.com. I'm Tanya Bohannon. Thank you so much for listening.